Hey YouTube, this is Eddie from Wicked Rebels. I wanted to make a video for people who are new to Procreate. So in this case, I am using a Apple iPad mini 5th generation and an Apple Pencil 2nd generation. This will work for any iPad that has pencil support. Even the older iPads will work for this situation. But right now, this is the main homepage of Procreate. First things first is we're going to go ahead and open a new canvas. So I already have one created, a custom one, 8.5 by 11 inches. To create a custom one to follow along with me, just use this button here and use inches, make 8.5 by 11. In this case, just for simplicity's sake and to save some time, I've already drawn this rose so that we can just go over pretty much the basics when it comes to drawing and coloring shadows and highlights. So we'll go over sketching, we're going to go over a monoline, we'll go over color, layers, and the selection tool just to make it really easy. So first things first, if you're just getting on that white piece of paper, you can go to the technical pencil. By the way, I'll put this image in a Google Drive in the description. That way you can just download it and import it and then follow along. But for right now, in this top right corner, there's a brush icon. Click on that. And then I have a brush library that I created. And I'll make a link for this as well if you want to follow along with these specific tools. But for right now, you can find the technical pencil in sketching. I just moved it over here just so that it's all in one column. But to sketch, just as you would on a regular piece of paper, just draw in, the shape that you want. So right now, this isn't a very good leaf. We're trying our best, and you can see it's kind of wobbly. But if you wanted to make a perfect arc, you can do a arc like this and hold at the very end, and it'll complete basically a perfect arc. You can do the same thing for the other side, and you can see it corrects itself automatically if you hold it at the very end. So you can also do this to straight lines. So for example, if you draw a straight line like this, it'll correct it for you, and then you can adjust it however which way you want. Once you have it auto-corrected, you can also click Edit Shape here when it appears after you correct the line. You can change it to an arc and then adjust it to whatever illustration you're trying to make. Different options here, like you can make a polyline, an arc, or just a traditional line. But for right now, we're going to erase this line. So for example, if you want to erase something you just did, all you have to do is just 2 fingers and hit it a couple times until it goes away. If you want to redo something that you accidentally removed, you can do a 3-finger and it'll bring the line back. So what I'm going to do is just remove these sketch lines and use the monoline or this number 1 liner. The liner, I have it set to about 15% on this bar here. You can control how thick the line comes out or how skinny it comes out. This will control opacity. So if the more you lower it, the dimmer it kind of gets. But for this line, it's actually a very dark line, and we're just going to keep it like that. So we're going back to 15%, and then we'll draw a leaf. So this is typically how I would draw a leaf. If you are having trouble with how shaky your hand is, or you're not really good at drawing, there's pretty good tools in here to help you kind of stabilize your hand. So for me, I like to stay within, let's say, 30 to 70% stabilization, and then streamline in the stabilization section here. Stick to about 13% for streamline, and then for stabilization about, let's say, 30 to 50, and that should get you some really clean lines. When you lower this, it gets more wobbly and less controlled. But when you increase it, you can see it's pretty smooth now. But for this demonstration, we'll leave it at 56 and then move on. All right. So for colors, you can access it here in this corner. It's like a circle on the top right. You can pick from any color here and draw a line. But for right now, we're just doing the outline for the rose. So we'll keep it at black. Here is a color palette that you can create. So if you wanted to save a specific color to your palette so you can use it later, you can set it like this. Just tap on this box here and you'll have that color saved. If you want to remove it, just hold it down and delete swatch. Okay, in the layers section here, what we're going to do is create 3 new layers. So we're going to need color, we're going to need shadows, we're going to need highlights. You can name it whatever you want. Doesn't really matter, but as long as you know what you're using them for. What I like to do is move the layer 2 or the outline to the very top, just so that everything that you're painting in goes underneath your lines, if that makes sense. So in this order is pretty much the way you want to do it. Color underneath, the shadows, and the highlights on top. When you do these type of designs, you want to add the shadows first, and then the color, and then the highlights. But in this stacked order lets you kind of manipulate it the best. So we'll start with shadows. First things first is on layer 2 where your outline is, click on this small box that has the thumbnail of your outline and set it to reference. After you do that, click back onto shadow. Make sure you do that because I can't tell you how many times I've actually had colored in on the reference layer with the outline and then having to erase all of the work that I did. So make sure you're back on the shadow layer and then go over to the top here where the Z looking icon next to the mouse. Click on that, and this is the selection tool. So this lets you pick options or shapes in your drawing so that you can target them and add a specific color or shade to them. So in this case, we'll start with the rose. So this is going to be different for any design, but for the rose, typically you want to have a shader type of brush. So I'm using a fine shader and I'm setting the color to black. Right now I have it set to about 25%, and I'll show you what it might look like when you start shading. So when you add shade on a selected item or shape, you can see that it only shades what you've selected and not anything else. So it makes it easy to add shade to very specific parts. So I don't like to go super dark initially, and then maybe later on I'll add some more darks, but we'll add just a little bit for now, just so that you can kind of see the rose taking shape. So we'll add some here and here. And just FYI, there is a selection slider. This will make sure that there isn't any border around your shade and the outline. So what you can do is make sure you set this up every single time you plan to shade or add color. You hold on to the blue section that's selected, and then make sure this is at around 97 to 98%. And that'll make sure that there's no weird outline, because if you forget to do that, then it's going to look really weird at the end, and it's going to have like a border where your shade is. So just add a quick amount of shade here. We'll do some fixing later, but this is just generally where I like to add some shade. So a little bit here. Kind of have to use your imagination, imagine where the shadows might be on some of the leaves. And the same thing for like highlights, so imagine where the darkest places might be on a rose. So here, a little bit on this one, and a little bit here on this corner. Probably some in here. Oops. So if you accidentally click on the outline, just undo by tapping it with 2 fingers. I'll select them both and then add some shadow here. And these last leaves, and that should be it for now. Let's do this stem really fast. Oops. Some right here, and there. Yep, that should be good. All right, so once you're finished with all of your shading, go back into your layers and start on the color. So in the colors, go to the color palette and then go to your section here, color palette, and start adding in some color. So what you can do is use the selection tool and add color that way. So we know that the leaves are going to be red and the inside of the flower. And then click back onto the color circle, click on the color you need, in this case red, and just fill it in with the shader brush that you have already selected. Once you do that, just do the same thing for the leaves. I want this one. We'll make it this tealish color. Add that in there. For these, I like to make them a brownish color or yellow brown. The inside here can be yellow just to give it some contrast. These flowers as well, just make them yellow. Select these, make them this bluish color. And for the stem, make it the goldish brown color. For the bottom here, on the stem, let's cut off, make it red. And we'll come back and shade that with black later on, but we'll come back to that. Alright, so now I think we're ready for some highlights. So we'll pick up some white from the color palette. And we're going to use the same shader we used, the fine shader. Go to the selection tool. And I like to do these one at a time just so that they don't go into other petals. For highlights on leaves, just pretend there's a light source coming from the top of your design, like in this section here. And that should give you an idea where it should be on the leaf. Oops. Alright, so we're pretty much done here. What we're going to do is go back onto the shadow layer, make sure you do that, and then make sure your fine shader is still selected. Use the selection tool, pick this little stem part and just a little bit of shadow here. Maybe a little bit from the top there. And that's pretty much it. So there's our final product. Oh yep, and don't forget the side leaves. Let's go to color, set it to this bluish color again. And just last tip, if you didn't save a color to your color palette and you want to extract a color from your design to put it somewhere else, for example, I want to color this little bead from this, I don't know what you would call it, but just hold onto a section in your drawing that has the color that you want, and then it'll change to that color in the color section, and then just fill it in. That's pretty much it for Procreate. There's not really much to it, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. I'll put a link to my Instagram and a link to my website in case you want to buy some artwork. Alright, well, that's it. See ya.